Hello and welcome to the day ahead. It's Monday, September the 15th. I'm Andrew Gagan. Well, the local share market is set to begin the week lower with ASX futures down around 0.2%. It was a mixed session on global markets on Friday with European shares slightly lower but ending up for the week. On Wall Street, the Nasdaq notched yet another record high. And for the week, the Nasdaq added 2%, the S&P 500 1.6% and the Dow climbed almost 1%. Mega cap tech stocks drove the Nasdaq higher on Friday, Microsoft gaining after it avoided a possible hefty EU antitrust fine by offering customers reduced prices for Office products, excluding Teams. Tesla shares surged after board chair Robin Denham dismissed concerns that Chief Executive Elon Musk's political activity had hurt sales at the EV maker and said the billionaire was front and centre at the company. Declines in Goldman Sachs and paint maker Sherwin-Williams dragged on the Dow. Warner Brothers Discovery shares extended a surge from earlier in the week when a source said Paramount Skydance was preparing a bid for the struggling media company. And shares of vaccine makers fell on reports that US health officials are planning to link coronavirus vaccines to the deaths of 25 children. Well, US consumer sentiment fell for a second straight month in September as consumers saw rising risks to business conditions, the labour market and inflation. The survey's measure of consumer expectations for inflation over the next year was unchanged at 4.8% this month. US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent plans to meet Chinese Vice Premier and other senior officials this week in Madrid to continue their discussions on trade, economic and national security issues. The meetings will also cover the status of the Chinese-owned social media platform TikTok. US Treasury yields rose in subdued trade on Friday as investors contemplated a weak economic data that increases the prospect of the first monetary policy easing in 9 months when the Fed meets this week. The yield on the US 10-year note initially ticking lower after the sentiment survey before finishing at 4.06%, the 2-year rising to 3.56%. While the Australian 3-year government bond yield rose to 3.47% with markets pricing in just a 10% chance. The cash rate will be cut by 25 basis points at the next meeting at the end of this month. The US dollar index was little changed. The Aussie dollar is currently at 66.5 US cents. And Bitcoin is trading just below 116,000 US dollars. Oil prices rose on Friday after a Ukrainian drone attack suspended loadings from the largest port in western Russia, but gains were capped by concerns about US demand. Brent crude futures at $67 a barrel. Copper was a little changed, while iron ore rose marginally to $105 US dollars a tonne, and gold is up 0.25% to $3,642 an ounce. Well, a relatively quiet week locally with the RBA officials speaking on Tuesday and Wednesday. The major economic release will be the monthly read on labour force data on Thursday. Overseas, today China releases retail sales, production and investment data. Tuesday, US retail sales, import and export prices, industrial production and business inventories. Wednesday, the Fed's FOMC hands down its interest rate decision with a 25 basis point cut expected. This is followed by interest rate decisions from the Bank of Canada on Wednesday, Bank of England on Thursday and Bank of Japan on Friday. On the corporate front today, those companies trading ex-dividend include Credit Corp, Data3, Guzman & Gomez, Kelsian, Lovisa, Cube and Ramelius Resources. That is your day ahead. See you again tomorrow.